Okay, AP Environmental Science. This is a continuation of Unit 5. We are going to talk about topic 5.8 today, which is on the impacts of overfishing. So, one of the things we talked about previously was the tragedy of the commons. We have these resources on our planet, and if we overuse them or misuse them, that could result in some pretty um, serious consequences for the resource and for the people on our planet. So overfishing is one of these examples of kind of a tragic thing that can happen again if we sort of do things the wrong way. So let's talk a little bit first about just harvesting fish, and shellfish. They kind of both go into the same category. Um, but one thing about fish that we have to kind of understand is why do we fish in the first place? Fish is a pretty important source of animal protein. You know, every human being that walks the planet, needs protein. So we can get protein from plants, we can get protein from animals. A lot of the protein that we consume as a species comes from animals. We're going to talk a lot about beef and poultry a little bit down the road, and one of the other subtopics in this unit. But fish is one of those. It's one of those major sources of animal protein, and we know that the population of our planet is growing, so the need or the demand for that animal protein is going to be increasing as well. So the demand for fish and the need to fish is going to be increasing. So here's a definition of a fishery. A fishery is a commercially harvestable population of fish within a particular ecological region. So we could be talking about, I don't know, let's say Alaskan king crabs or something, off the coast of Alaska. We can be talking about salmon, in a river, in Oregon or something. I mean, a fishery again is just it's an area of harvestable fish that we can consume, for our own needs. Now, here's the thing about fisheries: is this decade, or I should say this century, 2000s, 30% of the world's fisheries have experienced a 90% decline in fish populations. So, because we're fishing so much, we've gotten to the point where we have, literally depleted a lot of our natural fisheries. This graph here kind of shows us, I guess, kind of a visual representation of this. If we go back to, let's say, the mid 60s, this is catch per 100 hooks. For example, if you had 100 fishing hooks in the water, you can be expected to catch about 5 fish, whatever. Now this is below one, so it kind of gives us an idea that there's just less fish available. And, that's mainly because we're catching so many. So we have to kind of look at these fishery collapses, as an indicator or a sign that there's a problem. And a fishery collapse is basically the decline of a fish population by 90% or more. And again, why is this happening? It's happening because of overfishing. Now, overfishing is occurring because it's just so easy to catch fish. On the next couple slides, we're going to talk about some fishing techniques that make it, really easy to, accumulate a lot of fish in a very short amount of time. And you'll see why this is becoming kind of an issue. So, why is this problematic? Why is overfishing an issue? One, it just leads to less fish. If we catch them all, there's not going to be as many left to consume. It also lowers biodiversity. If we catch all the fish, that's going to affect food chains, and that lowering biodiversity affects that. All right, so some of these techniques, I want to go through these one at a time and just kind of briefly and kind of show you, I guess, why it's so easy to catch fish. One technique is called long line fishing. It's literally just a long line. Now, when I say long, I'm talking these lines can be 100 miles or longer. I mean, imagine a 100-mile long fishing line and how many hooks you can hang from that. These commercial, fishing, vessels just basically lay these lines out in the water. They're suspended with buoys. I mean, you can catch a lot of fish this way. One of the issues with long line fishing is not only do you catch the fish that you're intended to catch, but you also may be catching things that you're not intending to catch. Birds, for example. All these hooks, you'll probably have some type of a bait, that's kind of suspended from it. And fish, or I should say, birds will just dive into the water and try to grab that bait, and they end up getting hooked. You end up hooking a lot of fish that you don't intend on hooking, like say sharks, or maybe even things like sea turtles can be caught in these as well. So that's kind of an issue with it, but it is an easy way to catch a lot of fish very quickly. This is called purse seine fishing. Purse seine fishing is basically a large net. And again, when I say large, these things can be 6,000 feet wide and over 600 feet deep. So, at the bottom, they kind of get knotted up and tied at the bottom, so it's kind of tight. And literally, they just pull it up and then they tie it at the top, and it literally just traps all the fish inside. So, again, it's a really easy way to catch a lot of fish at one particular time. You just drop the net in and then just allow it to rise up, and then it just closes. And it's almost like you're, encapsulating thousands and thousands of fish at once. So, it's a fairly easy way again to catch a lot of fish. This is drift netting. Again, kind of like long line fishing, but instead of using like hooks, they just use this like big long net. It's almost like a big volleyball net. And again, it can be hundreds of miles long. They just lay it out in the water. It can be adjusted for depth, so they can catch fish like in a shallow area or a little bit deeper if they want to. And the holes in the net can vary in size depending on if you want to catch larger fish or smaller fish. So the fish will just literally just kind of swim into it, and their gills get caught in the holes in the net. And then you just bring the net in, and you've got thousands and thousands of fish. So again, it's an easy way to catch lots of fish at one time. This is called trawling or drag netting. This is where they use kind of a weighted net, and they'll just drop it to the bottom. Sometimes it's like a cage. They do this a lot with like shellfish, and they'll just kind of drag it along the bottom of the ocean and just accumulate whatever's down there. They catch shrimp this way, a lot of crabs and shellfish, things like that. The one thing with trawling, because it's not like a suspended net. It's literally dragging along the bottom of the ocean. It ends up doing a lot of damage to the ocean floor. So whatever's down there, any habitats, if it's a coral reef or whatever might be there, it's going to disrupt that habitat. So that's kind of problematic when it comes to trawling or using these drag nets. Another one that we may not think about too much, but it's the use of sonar. Sonar is basically just using like radio waves to bounce off of surfaces to locate fish at different depths. It's kind of like using depth finders and things like that. But they're very effective at locating fish. So it makes it really easy for fishermen to not have to drive around in their boats all the time and locate them. They can find them very easily. So in that case, they're using less fossil fuels because the boats run on gasoline, right, and oil. So they'll use less because they don't have to spend the time looking for the fish. So I guess that's a positive. But one of the big negatives with this is the sonar that's used actually disrupts whale and dolphin communication. Whales and dolphins are mammals that use or not echolocation, but sonar to help them communicate with either mates or members of a pod or whatever they are. And if they can't communicate with each other, they can get lost at sea and not be able to breed with each other. So it's actually a form of noise pollution. We think of noise pollution, we think of it like above the water, like on land, but it can actually happen in the water as well. So that's kind of problematic for those particular species. Large scale fishing problems. We just talked about one of them, drag netting. That could damage a lot of ocean habitats and things like that. Another big one is something called bycatch. Uh, Bycatch is the unintentional catch of a non-target species. I mean, for example, if let's say they're fishing for tuna, and they end up catching sea turtles, or sharks that they're not intending to catch. But a lot of times that can do a lot of damage to those organisms. It could even kill those organisms. So that's like sort of an unintended consequence of overfishing. Is that we get these other organisms that we're not intending to catch, and they end up being damaged in the process. So that really can reduce populations of these organisms. I know sharks and sea turtles have been greatly affected because they've just been caught up, in this in these commercial fishing practices. It's really problematic there. All right, now some solutions. What are some things that we can do to kind of help the problem with overfishing? One of the things that we can do is we can set fishing limits, or catch limits, and we generally base those. We talked about this the other day. We base those on maximum sustainable yields. We can measure population sizes in the ocean. We know approximately how many fish there are. And as long as we don't overcatch, we don't go beyond that MSY value. If you don't know what that is, go back and watch the previous video about it. But as long as we don't go beyond that, then we're okay. So we set those limits based on that. So we just basically tell, all of these, fishing industry, all these fishing vehicles and captains of these boats and whatever, that hey, you can catch this many, and that's it. If you catch more than that, you have a choice. You can either throw them back, or you can sell them to someone else who has not gone above their catch. You can do that as well. So there's a couple different ways that we can solve that problem, but I think setting these limits is probably a good thing. Another thing that we can do is we can limit the age or the size of the fish that we catch. Let's say, for example, we're catching tuna. The larger the fish, more likely it's an adult. So they might say, well, you can keep the tuna that are above a certain size, because those fish are probably towards the end of their life anyway. So those might be good to keep. But the juveniles, who are still yet to breed, or maybe they're still in their reproductive years, those fish you have to throw back. So they've set those limitations on that as well, which that can help the populations rebound. Another thing that we do, and this is really good for the bycatching problem, is we can modify our fishing techniques to kind of limit how much of that bycatch gets caught up. A really good example of this is something called a TED. It's also known as a turtle exclusion device. This is a really good device that they've incorporated into these trawling nets. So, for example, what they'll do, here's the net here, and they basically just scoop up all the fish that they catch. But if turtles get caught inside, they'll have sort of like a little trap door that allows the turtle to escape. That's what the TED is. It's a very simple thing, a very simple idea, but it has really helped to reduce the amount of turtles that get caught in these nets, because it lets them get out, but all the other organisms stay within the net. So that's something that we can do, or that we have done. In fact, I believe they've passed a law that says if you're going to use a trawling net, or a trawling cage, or whatever it is, they have to be fitted with TEDs. It's against the law not to have them fitted with them. So That's kind of a good thing. It helps really reduce the bycatch of sea turtles. Finally, the thing that we can do, or that we can do, is we can just pass laws and treaties. There's two of them that I want you to know. One of them is called the Sustainable Fisheries Act. This was passed in 1996, and it basically says that if there's a certain species of fish that has fallen, that has been overfished and has fallen below its MSY, for example, then the government has the right to shut down those fisheries. You cannot fish in certain areas until those populations rebound. So that's kind of a good thing. It's kind of government intervention, but it basically gives governments of certain countries the right to ban fishing to protect specific fisheries and specific habitats, so that they can be protected. The other one is called the CITES Treaty. This one, it stands for the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. This one, guys, is one you're going to have to know for the AP test. Basically, what this does is it protects endangered species from being transported and traded. So essentially, what it does, let's say, for example, if you are I don't know, a captain of a big fishing vessel, and you're fishing for crabs or tuna or whatever you're doing. If you get caught, let's say with sea turtles, which are endangered species, if you get caught with these things on your boat and you're not protecting them and putting them back and things like that, you can get fined heavily. Your fishing license can be revoked, which basically means you're going to lose your job. You can even get jail time for these types of things. So 183 different countries have agreed to this treaty. So we've got a lot of countries around the world that believe that in order to protect these species, one of the things that we have to do is protect them while they're in the water, particularly, but it also involves land species too. But you cannot fish for these things or be caught with them on your boat or transport them from one country to another. It is completely illegal to do that. So make sure we know what the CITES Treaty is. It's designed to help protect endangered species from being transported or traded, a really important thing, okay? All right, the last thing here is I just want to give you a little FRQ prompt. I'm going to have some of these questions in your homework. Let's just kind of go through these initially here. It says, choose any two commercial fishing practices from the list below. For each of your choices, describe the practice and explain the role it plays in the depletion of marine organisms. So you can choose from trawling, long line fishing, drift nets, they also call those gill nets, or purse seines, those are those big purse seine nets, or using sonar. So you've got to choose two of those four, describe it, and explain how it depletes marine organisms. The second part says identify one international regulation or United States federal law that applies to the harvesting of marine food resources and explain how that regulation or law helps to manage marine species. I'll give you a hint. We just talked about two of them. Identify and explain a way other than passing a law or signing a treaty to reduce overfishing of a species. These are things that I think are important that you're able to do. These are FRQ prompts. You might see these on the exam this year, but be able to answer these. And again, you'll see these in your homework tonight. All right, guys, have a good day. I will talk to you soon.